Greetings and welcome once again to Solonomics 101. My name is Imuna Yisrael, recent author of Angry Black Woman Syndrome. Been missing for a couple of days, maybe a week or so. Just really meditating and studying and furthering my understanding on certain subject matters. So I'm back because I saw a question that was posed by a sister recently about what is the need for black people to be accepted by white people. It's interesting because it's in the course of the line of our study, and I saw she was pleading for understanding, not to say that I have the fullness of understanding, but I will definitely share what it is that I've learned. The thing about understanding what we want to know is that we have to be willing to open up our mind that truth may not come as we want it. And I'm not just speaking directly, now I'm speaking in general, so nobody feel no way. But basically, the truth is the truth. And our emotions sometimes block us from seeing the truth. And I notice oftentimes our community, because of the emotional trauma that has been done, and that's what I want to talk about today. But before I get there, because of the emotional trauma and the injury that has been done, we tend to sometimes not look at the entire picture. So with understanding, if we really want to know the truth, then we have to be willing to stomach the entire truth. Recently, I've been reading a lot of slave narratives because I've noticed that when we say the word slavery or oppression and racism, it's kind of ambiguous, not only for Europeans, but as well as quote-unquote black people. We have the key little ones that they taught you on February, you understand? And the whole richness of the history is lost in for lack of a better word, right? Whitewashing it. And we ourselves don't know our own history. That is a damaging part of our healing process. And why I say healing process is because if we don't understand the nature of the injury, we don't know how to heal it. If you go to the doctor, the first thing they're going to do is diagnose you or begin to ask you a line of questioning so that they can understand the nature of the injury. So when we are seeing people, and I see some comments that say, okay, we know the issue, but we don't know the degree of the issue. We do know that there's something wrong. We do know that there were injury on many levels, mental, physical, and spiritual. You understand? And what we're looking at is the effects of those injuries. But it's like we keep getting upset at the effects of the injury. But usually when you're sick, you want to get healing. If you've been injured, you want to heal. So continuing to just rehash what's the problem is like saying to the person who was hit by a car, why you limping? Why you keep limping? Every time I see you, you limping. You better stop limping. Okay, he needs to go to rehab so that he can go to learn how to walk again and improve his gait, point blank. So for us, we don't have to, but it will benefit us if we want understanding to, yes, acknowledge that these are the symptoms of a deeper problem. And the problem is that we have been injured, like a bird with a broken wing. If you can pump him up all day, you're going to fly, little birdie. That doesn't mean he's going to fly. We have to know a little something about it. So what do I say? Some great books to begin to read if you want to. What I notice is, because I started this on the 1st of January, is a reading project. It's called Lift Every Voice, right? I say that to say, at first everybody's like, yeah, we're going to read. And then as we start reading, we're not ready. I can't stomach it. I can't hear it. That means we're not ready to address the injury. If you're hurt, you remember when you fell down when you was young and your mother looking at you like, no, don't touch it. Don't touch it. She start yelling and screaming at you because if I don't put peroxide on it or if I don't cleanse out the cut, it can't get better. So right about now, even though it's been hundreds of years, we're still like, oh, I can't look. I don't want to see it. It hurts too much. This is where we should start. Looking at the symptoms, that's cool. But start in what was the injury. Reason being, when you find out the injury, then you will begin to understand the psychology behind the injury. Now let's get on to, because I could go long on this, because like I said, this thing is getting juicy. So right about now we're reading 50 Years in Chains, a slave narrative by Charles Ball. But here's the thing. The thing is, at the time our foreparents were writing this, it was a revolutionary act. Reason being, it was illegal for you to read. That's another video as to why a lot of times black people don't want to go into books. maybe because you was under threat of punishment severely if you did. So psychologically, that has been passed down throughout the generations. They have a new study it's like I knew the words, but I couldn't give their new term. So the new term is epigenetics, where it is that the experiences of your foreparents, they're not necessarily hardwired like the color of your eyes or the length or height that you're gonna be, but their experiences have been passed down. I got a book. If you want to understand it, you have to be ready to search for the answers. This is a very interesting book. It's called The Betrayal Bond, right? It's talk about trauma bonding. We have to be willing to admit, even though it was under duress, even though that you were forced into this relationship, Europeans and black people were in a relationship. I know you might be mad right now, like, what? Sis is bugging out. You have to be at least willing to come to that term, that it was dysfunctional, but nonetheless, it was a relationship. The relationship needs to be looked at for what it was, and here's why. When you look at it for what it was and what it continues to be, it's like why you don't understand why a battered wife doesn't leave the husband, or why the abused child has still loyalty towards the parent. It's called trauma bonding. Research that term, look it up, and begin to understand that this dysfunctional relationship, and in my mind I'm kind of going back because I'm sourcing through the information as well as, you know, what kind of relationship, and I'm saying it wasn't more of a husband to a wife or a man to a woman. It was more of the system of racism and white supremacy was the parent to the indentured or enslaved people that they obstructed or traumatically removed from their environment in Africa. Some did not originate in Africa, but that's another story. Let's stay on this topic. First, we have to admit that black people and white people are in a dysfunctional relationship, one of which I would like to classify as parent to a child. Not to say that they're superior, but this is the position realistically, aside from the emotion, that once you were captured as a people, you were placed in, subjugated to the whims, thoughts, and desires of a parental figure. Meaning, as I'm reading these slave narratives, a good one to get is Weevils in the Wheat, which is over 300 narratives of ex-Virginia slave ex-slaves right before the Civil War. So they were younger when the Civil War came in, and so they're recounting their recollection of slavery. Also, the Library of Congress, it was a huge project, so it's over thousands of voices and narratives that they got. Why this is important to read is because not what you think today, but what your foreparents processed in their mind, their relationship to the slave master. You had to ask him about eating. You had to depend on him for food, clothing, and shelter. A lot of times you were starved. A lot of times you were beat. A lot of times you went naked. Who's responsible for feeding, clothing you, and taking care of you? Your parent. So they were in a dysfunctional, abusive. Today, they would be visited by ACS. You know what I'm saying? DCF. They would be visited by DCF because this child or the black community of who you put yourself over would have been neglected, abused, sexually exploited, physically abused, emotionally traumatized. So let me get back on point. This relationship, right, is dysfunctional, and there is a bond there. No matter how dysfunctional it is, we have to address. You want to know why you're still holding on, why you still seek approval, why X, Y, and Z, because of the positioning of one to another. It does not mean what was said was true. It meant that after the trauma, this now is the dynamic of which they're working from. I have some interesting thing to read from the book. Okay, the person who's writing this book, I find it interesting to read what Europeans write, and here's why. Because oftentimes, because they're going through their own level of denial, and because they're going of their own level of dissonance, they're writing, but you're not included. But if you read between the lines and critically think, you understand that this is applied to you, so they're kind of telling you the game plan. So he writes, betrayals that cause horrendous and long-lasting traumas are the worst. Such was the Holocaust, or Vietnam, or Russia after Stalin's purge followed by the Nazi invasion. You notice slavery was nowhere in there. But as we read the criteria, slavery is all the way up in there. These emotional scars can be so severe. This is the part that I want you to hear, that they're calling epigenetics today. These emotional scars, meaning from betrayal traumas like kidnapping, and they talk about holding people hostage, and they talk about doing things and forcing people to go against their will, all of which slavery classifies 100%. He says these emotional scars can be so severe that generations descended from those surviving, you, I, us, will react in ways that still reflect the original trauma, you, I, us. No amount of what appears to be normal makes it safe. Patterns and attitude evolve far beyond the individual and are incorporated into the fabric of family and society. Meaning, the slave master was molesting the 12-year-old. Actually, I just read an incident. She wasn't 12, she was 15. It's Cecilia versus the state of Missouri. Check that one out. But anywho, so you would go to your parental figure who had no authority to protect you. They would then in turn tell you to be quiet because it was illegal during that time to testify against, a slave could not testify against its master. Furthermore, it was not on the books that rape applied to women of color. Reason being, you were property and therefore you were under the full control of your master, meaning you could not be raped. All of this was downloaded into the mind and the thought process of the individual, or let's say the black woman in this case. And so family could not protect you. The system could not protect you. And this is what you passed on. What did you feel at that point? If you were your foreparent, what did you feel? What stresses, what emotional turmoil, what trauma did you experience? How did you internalize it? And how did you pass it on? I know it sounds like a lot, but the answer, because the trauma wasn't like instant, the answer is not going to be instant. There is not a one-liner as what the problem is. This is something that we have to be dedicated to looking into. And what I find with our people is we want quick fixes, because oftentimes in our mind, and it's not an insult, we are still in the emotional state of a young child, meaning you need to manifest quickly the answer for what I'm looking for. I don't want to do the work or go through the process of doing the work to be able to find out this solution. I want someone else to do the work. That doesn't work, because as soon as someone else does the work and that person is no longer there, we have that kind of heroine thought process, and it doesn't work. So we as individuals, if we are serious about this return, I'm not the only one who speaks like this. We have a lot of people who are speaking about healing in the community. Dr. Joy DeGruy, who talks about this post-traumatic slave disorder or syndrome. This is what this is. And we have to go into the actual thing and begin to break it down in segments and find out, okay, what would this have created in the mind? So why do you need approval? The same reason that children seek approval from their authority figure. Because you have shown me in your mind, in my mind, that you are above me. And even though I am fighting to say I'm grown now and I can do my own thing and I have my own house, certainly in the recesses of your mind, that memory and that thought that your foreparents passed down to you, you always want to kind of reappear to the individual, to the parental figure, and show them, see, I've made it. See, I can stand on my own 2 feet. It's deep, and like I said, it's not a one-liner. This is a very interesting read. I'm almost finished through it. I'll come back and go through the abuse inventory list, because there's some who's still in denial or who can't efface the abuse and still perpetuating this abuse that once was the slave master to the slave, and now it's one to another. So I'll come back at another time and go over this abuse inventory list that he puts. Apparently it wasn't for us, but apparently it is for us, in the sense that this is what has been done. And until we're ready to take a look at that, we're just going to keep going around and around, and we're going to sound like, So educate yourself. Read more. Go into the history. See what parts you can't even stomach, and begin to reflect within yourself why. Let me sum this up if I was running on and kind of lost you. Traumatic bonding, look that up. Or where it is you bond, and they say the Stockholm Syndrome, which is another story or incident that displays or illustrates traumatic bonding. Europeans who were in this country and the diaspora were in a relationship with black people of the diaspora. This dysfunctional relationship and the evidence thereof still exists today. We can deny it, and this is why, even though you're in a dysfunctional relationship, you can't stop talking about the other person. You are obsessed with the other individual. You have unrealistic expectations of the other individual. You spend time day and night because why? You are bonded in a way that people on the outside can't understand. And you have to understand before it is that you can sever that bond, you have to understand what in the world is it to begin with. So until next time, hopefully that led some clarity on it. Like I said, this book is The Betrayal Bond. You can look up traumatic bonding. There's so many narratives that you can get. Incidents in the life of a slave girl, 30 years a slave, 50 years in chains. Cecilia, it's a true story about a slave who was being raped over the period of 5 years by her master, who never came to justice, and she couldn't take it anymore, and she was in Missouri, and she took a stick and hit him twice, and he died, and she disposed of the body. Thereafter, they put her on trial for murder, and you got to read the story to find out what happens next. Once again, don't wait for Black History Month to really understand, because the benefit for you understanding is for you, your liberation, and true revolutions. So thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Imuna Yisrael. You can check me out on all social media, Twitter, Facebook, and here on YouTube. So definitely subscribe. And we are currently in the project. So reach out to me if you would like to join, if you would like to volunteer to read, whatever it is that you would like to do, and join into this discussion. So until next time, one.